recording. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and your busy schedules to spend time with us on returning to the workplace. I'm Steve Furman. I want to go over a couple ground rules or just some things so we all know how we're going to go about doing this. This webinar is being recorded. It will be emailed out to all participants as well if you'd like to share it or see it later. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section that's on the bottom of your screen down there. And Katie, I should call her Magical Katie, will go ahead and help manage those for us, and we'll answer them at the Q&A section. If you have any issues, enter them into the chat directed to the panelist or host, and we'll make sure that we get those issues fixed up and taken care of for you. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce the famous, infamous Jerry Quinn.
Oh, well, thank you, Steve. And you're pretty infamous yourself. So this is going to be really exciting, and I'm excited to do this with you. Let's get started. First of all, here are some things in our agenda. It's pretty aggressive agenda, so listen up. You want to maybe take some notes because we're going to help you clarify some of these issues. So at least you know the layers of issues that you're going to be dealing with in order to come to a decision about how to move forward in this very cloudy work environment. So masking and vaccinations, and whether you're going to be an in-person, remote, or hybrid office, and certainly plenty of technology information and cybersecurity information. And in order to make those decisions, you have to know about some underlying guidelines and trends and issues. And then there's some practical things like checklists and plans and teams that you'll want to have under your belt. There's a lot of different things that you see on those lists, or on that list, as well as the budget considerations. And we'll have some Q&A in the middle and some Q&A at the end. So let's get going. You ready, Steve?
I'm ready, and don't forget we got some polls too, so we'll see what everybody's consensus is later as well.
Oh yeah, let's get everybody's audience participation going. So this can be fun for everyone. Those who know me know that I'm an executive business coach. I'm an author, a speaker, a facilitator, a consultant, and a serial entrepreneur. I think I'm working on business number 6 as we're speaking. I have a company called Driving Improved Results, and we have a number of experienced professionals focused on human capital development as part of my team. All those members have 25 to 35 years of experience. I have a couple of books out, and you can see in the services area the kinds of services that I offer to the marketplace and to you if you're interested. And we have some things about Steve Furman too, and some
that aren't loading. That's okay. I can fix that. Let me just share my screen real quick. And it would help if I was on the right slide. My apologies. You ever have one of those days? I'm having it.
Yeah, I'm sorry that this didn't load properly. It worked in all our practice sessions, right, Steve?
It always works in the practice session. Everything was perfect. Here we go. Try this. And about Steve Furman. I'm a CEO, serial entrepreneur. I built over 6 companies. I'm actually working on my 7th. I'm also a United States Marine and a veteran. I'm the founder of Integrity, a technology management company providing virtual chief information officer services. All team members have 30 plus, 40 plus years of experience. We basically provide guidance and validation that your technology and IT spend are in alignment with your business goals, company vision, and initiatives. And there's our service areas as well. If we could be of any assistance, please do let us know. Back to you, Jerry.
All right, thank you. So this is what we're going to talk about first, because this is the biggest area that is under concern right now, vaccine mandates. And you can see that a recent study was done by, conducted in August, that 81% of New York City-based employers in the companies representing the survey are fully vaccinated, And in another survey, 52% of employees only want to work in a vaccinated office. So that shows you the trend. Companies with over 100 employees, of course, Biden came out with this recently, are mandated by the federal government to be vaccinated or to submit to weekly testing. And we're still waiting for the OSHA implementation that might actually come through this week. The background of that is that 170,000 businesses employ 100 or more employees, and that accounts for about 65% of the US workforce. But that leaves about 80 million people that are not covered, and they work for 17.5 million or so smaller businesses that won't have to factor into those OSHA requirements. And the other thing to know is that the OSHA requirements are only will only hold water in about 29 states. The other states will have to have some kind of regulatory things that mimic the OSHA requirements, but their enforceability might be not the same. And then the other thing to recognize is that this is an emergency thing that only is in effect for 6 months. And so it will have to be transferred into a permanent regulation in order for it to last beyond 6 months. With that in mind, though, keep in mind that a number of different companies are interested in having vaccination mandates at their workplaces even before Biden came out with that, especially in the New York area. Now, there are also some carrots and sticks involved. Delta is charging a penalty, kind of a penalty, $200 a month increase in your health insurance if you're not vaccinated. And what they've seen is that if 1/5 of the people who are unvaccinated then chose to become vaccinated, the other 4/5 did not. And I guess they're just expecting that 200 a month increase, and they're willing to live with that. A few did quit, but not that many. And then Southwest is offering 16 hours of extra pay as an incentive. So there's your carrot, right? And Whirlpool and Vanguard are actually doing $1,000 incentives. Something else to remember is that the Pfizer vaccine was officially approved by the FDA, and that many companies were requiring vaccinations even before Biden's announcement. So it's often called no jab, no job. That's going to be ruled out by 52% of employers of all sizes, and then 19% more probably by the end of the year. And some companies will make it a condition for employment. And that's, there are vaccine mandates of one kind or another in half the US states and in 1,000 of the top universities, in the military, the organizations getting federal Medicaid and Medicare dollars. Yeah, so some of these mandates are there. Some of these things are actually happening. It's a question of enforceability. So I work with a nonprofit organization in Brooklyn, and the nonprofit has a number of people who are employees that are from minorities and also probably less educated. And only 20% of their workforce is mandated, and they get a lot of Medicaid dollars. And I'm speaking to the executive director, don't you feel you need to mandate this to follow these regulations and guidelines? And he says, all the other nonprofits are pretty much at the same level of having that 20% vaccination rate. And if I were to mandate it now, all my employees would leave and go to these other agencies. And so, and it really has to be enforced for all, or else there's going to be a mass exodus of employees going to the places where they don't have mandates. So enforceability is going to be, and is really a big issue when it comes to the vaccine mandates among the high percentage of our population that is still not vaccinated. And of course, that's less in New York than it is in maybe the southern or the western mountain states. But it's still something that contributes to a surge in New York from time to time, especially with the Delta virus.
Sure.
I'm going to talk now about mask requirements. So the CDC says to wear masks in indoor locations, especially in crowded areas, both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. And that's because, masks prevent breakthroughs, even among the vaccinated people, and allows the vaccinated people the assurance that even though they might be asymptomatic, if they're carrying some virus with them, they won't be bringing it home to their unvaccinated children or other vulnerable family members. And masks create protection for the unvaccinated as well as the vaccinated people. And you'll find that a lot of people who are being careful will double mask in airports and airplanes and on subways and other places where they really don't have control over the environment. There was a study done by Willis Towers. I want to go back to
Sorry about that.
there was a study done by Willis Towers, and they found that 80% of 1,000 companies that they were surveyed are requiring employees to wear masks, and 13% are planning to continue to do that. Now I think we want to run the poll. So there's a poll called the back office poll. Katie, can you run that now? So here we're asking all our participants to see how many of you are back in the office or thinking about going back, and please mark your choice there.
And the people are making their choices. The results are still coming in.
And maybe the last couple of people want to respond.
Yep.
If not, maybe we're ready to end the poll.
Go ahead and end the poll, Katie, and show the results. Share the results. So there's your answer. It looks like most of the people are fully back in the office. 50.
At 50%.
Yep.
And 21% have chosen to stay remote, and 36% are in creating a hybrid model for themselves. Thanks, Katie. You can stop sharing that now. Yeah, just X out of it, please. And Steve, if you want us to go to the next slide. So returning to work, this is a big issue on everybody's mind other than the vaccination and masking issues. So 70% of Manhattan employers are going to a hybrid model, which was not reflected in our poll. Of course, we had a very small sample. 23% have already returned to the workplace, and that was done by the Partnership for NYC in August, just last month. Certainly New York City employees have started back last week. They're fully back at the office, and that was mandated. And some people are predicting that 40% of employees of the city are going to quit and move to the other 70% of Manhattan employees who are going to go to a hybrid model because they want a hybrid model because of health concerns and desire for remote work options. So if you're going to adapt a hybrid model, think about whether you're going to have staggered weeks or days off where certain employees come in for 3 days and the other come in for 2 or 3 days. And that leaves 2 or 3 days per week or every other week that people are in the office, that any one team is in the office. And that allows for not only social distancing, and especially in a small office, but it also allows for, if there were to be some kind of super spreader person who happened to come in on a day when half the team is there, then the other half, and those people all get sick simultaneously, then the other half of the team is still available to keep the business running. So it provides a little insurance there. The other hybrid model is that certain positions or employees who want to work remotely and can do so because of their job descriptions do that on a permanent basis, while the other positions return to in-office work. And you can see that Microsoft and Facebook and some other companies are there in terms of who's coming back, who's going to have a hybrid model and how they're structuring their hybrid model. And certainly there's a lot of delaying going on because of Delta virus has changed everybody's plans.
Actually, Jerry, my daughter was just sent home last March and she works from home 100%.
And a lot of companies would like to do that because now when they're hiring, they can get employees from anywhere in the world to fill out their team. So it really gives them a greater breadth of choice when they're recruiting candidates. There was a survey done by Health Equity of 1,000 employed Americans. 77% did not want to return to working on site full time. And almost all of those people said the number one reason they didn't want to return to work in the office because the time and the costs associated with that commute. Others have mentioned that they didn't want to, health concerns. They didn't want to expose family members to what they might pick up at the office. Others were concerned that and we're going to get into this with the Great Resignation, why people might want to change jobs because they want something much more aligned with their own personal purpose. And we also might find that others have had time to think and they want to work for a better culture. They weren't treated particularly well during the whole of the epidemic. And so they really want to change culture of the company they're working for. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you're going to have people come back, you want to make sure that you give them 1 month's notice because you're going to have to make childcare arrangements or maybe arrangements for other people in their family. They may have to explore different ways of getting to work. You want to have people come in from your senior level of staff to welcome people back into the office. So if you're going to have a day when people come back in, have some kind of appreciation gift for them and have all your senior managers there to welcome them. Make it a big deal and make it a celebration. And there are some studies that say working from home tends to lead to better productivity of those workers. And then there are some studies that say working on site leads to better collaboration and a more well-developed culture. So there are a lot of choices to be made, and we're going to go into more of that. Whatever you do, make sure you've explored the legal ramifications of everything with your company's lawyers. Because, for instance, with Biden, you can have a vaccine mandate, or else people can opt to have weekly testing. If you have weekly testing or copies of vaccine information, all of that has to be managed in a secure way. You have to have policies around all that. You've got to know who's been compliant and measure all the everything that has some kind of legal aspect to it. And if you have unions, you're going to have to negotiate with your unions. They might want to change some of the deadlines between the union employees and the non-unionized employees. So there's a lot to think about. And so you want to get your lawyers involved in some of that as well. I think what we're going to do is we're now going to have another poll. So Katie, would you set up the resignation poll, please? Yeah.
Hey,
So is your
Jerry, real quick, there's just a short question I think you could probably answer real quick. Has anyone looked at the remote productivity rate since the pandemic?
many.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
personally have always said people get on earlier, they stay on longer, they'll get up at 8 o'clock from their PM, watch the TV and go, oh, I forgot to do that one thing and go do it. That's my personal experience.
Mhm. And I think people too are not commuting, and so they're putting a little extra time at home. And a lot of the surveys have been done that working from home does lead for more productivity. And sometimes they say there's a little bit of sacrifice in terms of collaboration or innovation or people feeling isolated. But I think a lot of that can be done, can be handled through better management. And so we're going to talk about remote management, how that's different than in-person management. There's an author now by the name of Keith Ferrazzi, who's done work around this. It actually had a book in the works even before the pandemic, because he did an extensive work around work-life balance and not even so much work-life balance as remote productivity. And so check out his latest book. I forget the name of it right now, but there's plenty of articles. You can just Google the productivity of working from home and see a lot of the studies that have been done on that.
Okay, so the polls are up. Looks like 75% is a no.
Mhm.
25% of you guys is a yes.
All right, so that tells me I have to explain a little bit more about it. What do you think, Steve?
Maybe a little bit more. You might have another slide on it even.
Yeah, so let's go to the next slide. So as you're coming through and making decisions about returning to work and vaccination and masking policies, there's a lot of underlying trends and issues and guidelines that you want to be aware of. You know, you've got to think in terms of how is this going to impact my business? And so the Great Resignation is one of these first things that let's explain a little bit more of that. So many employees right now are thinking, I stayed with my employer through the pandemic because there was so much uncertainty. I couldn't even give up my job. And these are not for furloughed people or people who lost their job. These are people who actually kept their job and were working remotely. And some of them are saying, you know, my employer wasn't particularly empathetic to me when I had my kids running around and I didn't really have a home office set up. And I was afraid for my parents because they, you know, I had to get them out of the nursing home while I still could. Or my children were learning from home, which was not a really, really good scenario. And my wife and I were competing for time at the kitchen table and time to work with our children. We had to take turns, and there was so much going on. I needed really to have a more empathetic boss. And I talked with one woman who was in Florida and her grandfather was in New York, and he was dying. And she asked for leave from her company to go visit him before he died. And they said no. And of course, it required something because she had to quarantine before she could go out and quarantine before she could leave to come back. So it was really, you know, more than a 2-week endeavor. And this company said no. And what did she do? When she could, she quit. And so that's contributing to this Great Resignation. As I said before, people who are being forced to come back, who don't want to come back, who really have fallen in love with the whole remote work from home or work from anywhere scenario, they're going to find a new job where that's perfectly acceptable. People who have had time to think about, why am I on this gerbil wheel of work, 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 just for the sake of earning a paycheck? I want to do something meaningful with my life. I want a company whose purpose is really aligned with my life's purpose. Maybe I want to go work for a nonprofit. Maybe I want to work for a company that has greener policies because I want to be more environmentally aligned as well. That's a passion of mine. Maybe I want to work for a company that's much more inclusive and has a better DEI policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so all these things go through people's minds.
People are starting their own businesses as well. They're just,
yeah,
you know what? I'm just going to go out and start my own business, whether it's selling jewelry online to you name it. So as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities that are popping up for businesses that never existed before. And if you see that opportunity and happens to match with your skill set and you want to go out and start a new business, it's a perfect time to do it. So that's a trend that you should pay attention to while you're making these choices about your own policies. Certainly, I've heard employment lawyers tell me, yeah, people didn't move during times of uncertainty. And right now they are really exploring what the opportunities are, but the real exodus will be in January. So if you're an employer and you want to bone up on your system to have a better culture, to show more empathy, to give everybody a career path, that's another thing. People want a career path. They want to see that there's a chance here for them to be promoted. If you want to bone up on all those things, now's the time to do it because you have a window between now and January.
Yep.
And so employee wellness is another trend. It's big in all the literature that you read. And if you want to read up more on this, be on LinkedIn and follow some of these hashtags on LinkedIn so you can see what a lot of businesses are talking about right now. Employee wellness is all about de-stressing, reducing anxiety, being more healthy. Certainly, I put on some COVID weight, which I've had to take off, some of which has come off and some of which hasn't. And I would love to get more physically fit because, you know, it's harder to be part of a online class than it is to be part of a in-person yoga class, right? But employee wellness is an important issue, and you want to be sensitive to it. And it's in your organization's best interest to reduce all that anxiety and stress that your employees are feeling. And they get burned out. And so you want to help them reduce that burnout. So maybe you're going to have more programs around nutrition or health or fitness or a health savings plan, family-related benefits, ergonomics around their workplaces, whether they be home and at work. And then pets coming to work. You know, all pets have become therapy pets lately. And then flex time and employee assistance programs and making exceptions for individual needs. All those are something that you want to include in what you're using to attract new staff and retain staff. Another thing that companies are playing with is the 4-day work week. And that's happened in a number of companies who are experimenting with it and have found really good results. So for instance, Microsoft found out that it increased productivity by 40%. There were fewer sick days. Recruitment was on the rise because it was looked at as a big benefit. Business was growing and employees were happier across the board. Kickstarter and even the country of Spain have been looking at the 4-day work week as a way to reduce burnout among employees and increase productivity. Client requirements. You might look at who your clients are and what some of their requirements are. I know for a fact that Morgan Stanley is requiring all its employees to come back. In addition, the vendors that they work closely with, they're requiring that their vendors bring their employees back, because if they're going to partner with them, they want to know that, you know, they have a standard work time and a standard access, you know, during the workday. So check out what your client requirements are to see if that indeed is something that is important. And of course, look at insurance costs. If you're going to offer your employees the opportunity to be tested weekly instead of getting a vaccine, then who's going to pick up those costs? Because insurance companies, little by little, are saying, we're not going to cover that for free. Your company is going to be billed, or the employee is going to be billed, or we're going to up your insurance rates in order to include that benefit. And so check out what those are going to, how they're going to impact your company. And all of these become part of your decision-making process. Okay, let's move on.
Jerry, I just want to remind everybody to enter any questions in the Q&A box that's on the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay.
Mm-hmm. How do these impact your decisions about your return to work policy? So establishing balance, making people who return feel safe, establishing social contracts, managing people in remote hybrid work environments, and budget management. We're going to touch on each of those. So let's go to the next slide. Balance is a big deal. You have a need for in-person collaboration, but you also have a need to get the work out and be more productive. And you have to balance that by what are some of the in-person resistances that your employees are showing you, and you have to be caring about that and offer some choice and have some empathy and respect for individual differences. If not, your culture will suffer and you won't get the productivity out of the people, even if you do bring them back. You have to think about what you're going to do to mitigate health risks. And what are you going to do to retain your staff, especially those who prefer the remote over the in-office work? and then attract new staff because maybe you want to grow, you've got positions to fill, and there is a staffing shortage. So how are you going to stand out among other employers to attract the staff and the talent that you want? And of course, budgeting is always a thing. Everything comes with a cost. And so we're going to give you a framework for that. And then the last thing is not something to overlook, because some leaders get mired in the past and don't adapt to change really well. And if you're going to, as a team, come up with some changes, you'll want to make sure that your management's on board, and it might take some persuading to get people out of their old ruts in order to help them be relevant in the world today. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things to work on when you're considering all of the above is having a checklist. And then to do that, you want to have you'll want to have some kind of communication plan formed by your team, and you want to develop policies for all the things that you see there. Certainly your HR people are going to be governed by some of the sick leave and family leave policies established by the government, but you're going to want to create policies around telework and what are the requests around that. And you're going to have a central source for communication, websites or weekly email or call-in. So communication is a big, big issue. You can't do anything and not communicate that to your team. People will feel very uncertain, and you'll really be just destroying your culture and catching people in the middle when they're already feeling uncertain about what's going on. So communication is a big, big thing. Can't stress that enough. Go ahead and let's go to the next slide. Making it safe for people to return. Certainly we talked about vaccination and face masks, but the social distancing between workstations, you can maybe rearrange the furniture, you can create paths through your office, a preferred pathway to the copy machine, or maybe change the location of that. What are you going to be your policies around your break room and your restrooms and the use of conference rooms? That's all about social contracting, talking to people and really facilitating a meeting where they talk to each other. You'll get more buy-in and fewer violations if you are helping people to make group decisions that they all can live with and they all feel benefits them. Getting at the water coolers. Now, there's real water coolers and then there's virtual water coolers. The real water coolers, you want to create traffic, social contracts around that. But then the virtual water coolers, if most people are not returning and they're going to be working remotely, that's where a lot of people bond and they connect and they chit chat about, going to their niece's wedding or the favorite recipe that they used last night, or what special things their grandchild just did, or, something about pets or whatever. That's necessary. That helps people bond, that helps people trust each other, that helps them work more collaboratively. And if you are having your team work remotely, then you want to address that with technology, and Steve can talk more about that. Certainly having air filters and plexiglass shields will make people feel more safe too. And sometimes you can have bracelets or tags that identify people's levels of safety so other people know how to approach them or not approach them. Next slide.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So when you're managing people in a remote and hybrid situation, it's a lot different than if you're managing them in a in-person situation. And that's probably what you found out yourself during the last 18 months. You're going to engage people differently. You're going to use the tools of your video conferencing software differently. You're going to have more and different icebreakers. You're going to do team building differently. And you're going to think in terms of task management versus time management. So if you're in person, you can walk past that person's desk 4 times during the day and see that they're really on task from 9 to 5. Whereas in a virtual situation, you're going to give them projects or things to do. And as long as they get it done by the deadline, you may not care whether they do it in the middle of the night or after they put their kids to bed, or after they picked up their wife from wherever, their spouse from wherever. And so it really allows them to have some flex time. And of course, that's one of the reasons they like to be remote, is to be able to be more responsive to their families, as well as to be less burned out. And so you're managing tasks instead of time. And that's a whole different kind of management. So when you are thinking about this, you might want to give your managers some additional training on how to do that next level of management. And certainly it impacts how you hold a meeting. So if you've got a hybrid staff with 4 people in the conference room and 4 people dialing in from Zoom or Teams or whatever, you're going to want to have a big monitor on the wall, so all those 4 people can be in the room with you in their little Zoom or Teams squares, so that they really get equal time in terms of input into the meeting. They are engaged, and you don't want to play favorites, and it's unconscious bias to kind of have out of sight, out of mind. If they're just on a little conference call that's represented by a dot in the middle of the table, then it's easier to forget that they're there, and you don't want to do that. You want to have them be an equal part of those meetings. And so you need the right technology. And that's where Steve picks off, because he's going to describe a lot of the technology that you might want to adapt to.
Thanks, Jerry. And speaking of which, as I started to say before, video conferencing considerations, thought process on setup for video meetings, having a conference room, putting up a screen, and maybe they have Zoom bars and all kinds of other cameras you can get. Logitech makes them. And standardizing on what you plan to use as an organization. Is it Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, Slack, GoToMeeting? And if you're not going to standardize, then make sure everyone's trained properly on how to use these applications and how to log in to use a system that you put in the shared space. Have you thought about privacy for space-sensitive meetings? Again, as I said before, I'm home. My door's shut. No one can tell what I'm saying, which is good news. But if I'm at my desk and Susie's sitting next door to me, am I using earbuds? Am I speaking out loud, and there's no divider or nothing in the way to protect us from getting some privacy? So you might want to have a room set up for private meetings as well. Have you made provisions for increased bandwidth in the office? And that is the amount of internet connectivity, or how much traffic you can put on your network. A lot of people have been working from home. I know one company of mine, a client, has bought all laptops for all their employees at home. And now they're going back to a 3-day in the office and a 2-day hybrid model out of the office. When everyone's in the office, they're going to be using up a whole lot of bandwidth. And you got to think about the Wi-Fi, and do you have enough capacity? Or do maybe you connect some of them into the local area network? This one, I want to put up a poll real quick on MDM. MDM is mobile device management. BYOD is bring your own device. So Katie, go ahead and put up that poll, and let's see how many people have BYOD policies in place. And it's either bring your own stuff or use your own equipment, supply it by the corporation. Okay, the polls are coming in. Okay, so it looks like a pretty high number. It's 55% on bring your own device. And that brings up a whole nother set of challenges, which we'll talk about. Go ahead and close that poll, or end the poll, Katie, and share it rather. So there you got 58% that do allow BYOD, which really kind of makes sense from a company perspective, because they've already got their notebooks, their cell phones, they're comfortable with it. Why not? So now you got to start thinking about, okay, what equipment do they have? Do they have Macintosh? Do they have PCs? Do they have a desktop at home? What do I need to provide equipment for them? So you got to start thinking about, do they need extra monitors so they have dual screens up and to be more productive? And have you done any planning for antivirus or anti-malware on a corporate level? If these people are bringing their machines in, Nothing personal to anybody out there, but who knows where you've been. So you got to think about that consideration as well. And have you considered how many users will use Wi-Fi or LAN? One of the things we did for that client that's going 3 days at the office and 2 days at home is we bought dongles. They all happen to have Macs, and we bought dongles so they connect some of the users to the local area network and some to the Wi-Fi. So we didn't need to upgrade the Wi-Fi, and they're actually doing their 3 days and 2 days now. They went back already. Have you made any considerations for phishing training, apps like KnowBe4 or Intune? Phishing is basically where you get a fake email where they're trying to get you to click a link or give a credit card or give a social security card number or something. And what these applications do is they send phony phishing attacks or fake ones to your employees. And if they do click on the link, it takes them to a training site and teaches them what they did wrong, but it educates them. So it's not a thing about beating up on somebody because they clicked the wrong thing, because it happens to all of us. But it is something that is really important, I think, for all companies, and especially these days, hacking and phishing is just, rampant. It's crazy. So another thing to think about is, have you put into effect spam protection program like Proofpoint or Barracuda for your email? Basically, it'll sandbox malicious or suspicious emails. It'll go ahead and open the attachments up in the sandbox, and if they're clean, it'll let them through. If not, you'll get the option to go ahead and delete them, but it notifies you as well. But again, a lot of it's just, being considerate and being aware for your employees. And phone system requirements. So I don't know about all you, but this device right here is my everything device. I do happen to have a handset. I have a voice over IP phone that I don't use because it automatically forwards to my cell phone. So you have to make some thoughts and consideration on, do you go to voice over IP to use your existing phone system, or allow the employees to use their existing phones and maybe give them a stipend? Another one of my clients is giving $25 per employee to just use their cell phones, which they already have earbuds for, headsets. They're already comfortable using them. And what happens is a voice over IP or a VoIP phone system has what's called DID, or direct inward dialing. So when you call the company phone number, you put in their extension, it directly dials it to that person's cell phone. They then pick it up, they have caller ID and can see who's calling them. And all the person that called in sees is the company phone number and the company name on their phone. But that makes life a little bit easier, a little smoother, and the employees appreciate a little bit of help in paying the phone bill, because we all know they're very expensive. Conference room considerations like a webcam, speakerphones. So if you're going to set up conference room video setup, make sure you have a really good speakerphone, microphone and speaker system that's on the conference room table. Some of the bars that are out there, like I think it's a Zoom bar, has the microphone and speakers built in that are pretty good and they have different size variations for different size rooms, but they're pretty good at picking up the sound and putting out the speaker sound. And employee privacy for meetings, back to that, it's very important to make sure that you allow your employees to have private space and feel safe having conversations, because now, again, we're all back around people and it's just, it's different, it's strange. One last point I'll leave you with is, I started doing cloud in 2010, and I said back then that people will get on earlier, they'll stay on longer, they'll be more productive, they'll be a heck of a lot happier. I, for one, personally have worked from home for a lot of years. The only downfall, which I didn't realize until the pandemic, was it's so easy to overbook yourself because you don't have to drive anywhere. So my advice to all of you is, schedule half hour or 45-minute blocks in between. Pretend you're actually traveling somewhere. Give yourself a break, go outside, get some fresh air. And I will give it back to Jerry.
Well, I do the same thing. I schedule breaks so that I can have meals, and then I, make a lunch, and then I go outside and eat it in the sunshine. Breaks are important. The mind really only can focus for like 45 minutes, and then it needs a break. And so, enhance your productivity by giving yourself breaks.
Yeah.
So everything that Steve talked about in the realm of technology has a cost to it. Certainly additional training and development so that you can develop career paths for everyone and move them along those career paths has a cost to it. Certainly additional benefits that you might offer, including increased insurance costs, is going to have a cost to it. And then if you are recruiting to add to your talent pool, as well as to maybe replace employees that might leave, there's cost, and so it's associated with that. So think in terms of what you're going to do in phase 1, what you're going to do in phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, and the various costs associated with these kinds of things, and build these into your budget. The budget year is coming up. So people are starting to plan for their 2022 budget year. It's not too early to start thinking, if whatever model we're going to go to, what are going to be the associated costs, and what do I have to build in? Maybe phase 1 is this last quarter, but the other phases are going to fall into next year. You want to be prepared for that. And there's one other end of the year thing that I want to bring up to you. As an incentive, the IRS is offering businesses and nonprofits with fewer than 500 employees a refundable tax credit to offset time used by employees to receive or recover from vaccinations, and to reimburse for paid sick and family leave for employees due to COVID-19. I'm not a tax person, so I had to read that, sorry. But check that out with the people who are on your accounting team, and see how it might apply to you. I think that's the end of what we have. We're going to go for questions now.
We've got like 10, 11 minutes. So Katie, if you want to read out some of the questions, and we'll answer them as quickly as possible so we get everybody's in.
Sure thing. One just came in through the chat from Marty. In a hybrid arrangement, how do managers introduce new employees to their companies and demonstrate corporate culture? How do employees find ways to interact with others outside of their departments and generate new ideas?
These are really, really, really great questions. And there are workarounds, and there are some things that are written about these things. Sometimes people have like an ongoing WhatsApp chat going on all day long where they can interact and do cultural kinds of things.
Slack,
might be
Slack team
or Slack, or even a text chain, right? If it's just a few employees. Sometimes companies will have all their work done remotely, but they'll get together once a quarter to socialize. And that might be taking the company somewhere in the Caribbean, or it might be just meeting at an outdoor tiki bar somewhere, or
virtual cocktail hours. I've seen companies do just to get everybody together, and the ones that are working remotely, then they can feel a part of it because they're all just on an actual meeting together.
And then virtual lunches too. They'll send everybody a lunch from a vendor local to where they are, and everybody just opens their lunch at the same time, but eats at their computers so that they can interact while they're eating the lunch that the company bought.
Right.
So new employees can get involved in company culture by being mentored by people. Certainly they might be mentored by their own manager, but then they can be included by mentoring some other people on their own team or on some other teams. Some companies actually do trade-offs. Company A has a person in one position, and company B has a person in a similar position for a day, or maybe 3 days, or whatever. It might be remote, it might be in person, but they trade spaces in those two companies, that maybe two divisions of a company, so that they can get out of their own silo and get exposed to what's going on somewhere else. There's a lot of different options. And Marty, does that answer your question?
You can always reach out to us if you have any more questions. Our contact information will be on the next page. Katie, give us the next one. I'm just trying to keep it rolling so we're respectful of your time.
Are there industries that it is mandatory for all staff to return to the office/work facility? Great
question. I don't know the answer to that question. How about you, Jerry?
It's that question of balance, right? There's nothing that's mandatory. I mean, there's
So
certainly things that's like sexual harassment training is mandatory, but nobody says you have to do it all in one place or as a group. Every company will be different. Some companies were formulated to be remote from the start, and they've never had an in-person meeting because their people are all over the world. And sometimes they choose to have a once a year convention so they can all meet, so they can have face-to-face interaction, and then they kind of live off the energy of that all year long.
Cool.
But there's nothing mandatory now.
Okay, next one, Katie.
Many of the companies that I am working with do not make their employees wear masks in the office. Is this a liability nightmare?
Well, I would think, I'm not Jerry, but I would think that if they have a policy, it should be across the board for everyone. That would be the liability.
Mhm.
Not having a policy or having a policy that is not fair and square across the board.
Yeah, I think if you've got one policy, it should be for everyone. And according to CDC guidelines, we should be following those guidelines. They're there for our protection. Certainly, if I were wearing a mask and Steve wasn't, and we were in the same office, I would feel that he was jeopardizing my chances of, being healthy, as well as bringing things home to my small grandchildren, for instance, who I'm going to see next. So I would not feel safe in that work environment. So you want to create safety. That's what it's all about.
Katie, next one.
How can businesses that had some people who worked remotely and others who stayed on in person, for example, a warehouse like Amazon, the C-suite and the admin worked remotely while the warehouse workers and drivers were essential? How do they navigate this correctly?
Well, that's a little bit of a wide open question, but I don't know what correctly really is. The reality is, if you have people that need to be in a warehouse to do the shipping, that's just a mandatory requirement of the physical act of what they need to do to perform their jobs. I think personally, if I was a CEO of that company, I would make some extra provisions because they are mandated to come in, maybe pay for the travel in and out of the workplace. But I don't know where you can really mandate that the office people have to be there, because the warehouse has to be there to physically ship if they can do everything properly and 100% remotely. That's my personal feeling. And I don't know if there's any laws. I don't think there's any laws about that.
No, there's no laws about it. What's important there to realize is everybody is remote or in person according to their role that dictates where they need to be. And I think most companies do that. And then the other thing is to think about culture. So if I'm a warehouse employee and Steve is an administrator at Amazon, for instance, I'm going to feel a lot better about my job if Steve comes to visit me once in a while. So come visit me and tell me I'm doing a good job, and give me an appreciation gift once in a while, and pay me a little bit more, like my travel costs, so that I feel as an essential worker, I am appreciated. And the risks that I take to get there or to be in a closer environment with people are appreciated.
Okay, Katie, next one. We're just about done. We got a few more in a few minutes. This is perfect.
When visitors come to your place of work, is it okay to ask if they are vaccinated?
It certainly is. In fact, many companies have that policy written right out there on their website. In order to enter our facility, you must be vaccinated, whether you're a delivery person, a visitor, a worker, or someone from the top office. Everybody must be vaccinated.
I think as long as it's documented, that's the real.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
needs to be out there, out and loud and proud, I think is the secret.
And sometimes your company policy might be it's vaccination or a recent COVID test. That might be the company policy. So, whatever the company policy is, that's what which you should adhere to.
And I see one last one I'm going to read out from Scott Last. With the tight labor market, do you think a mass exodus in January of workers will force companies to pay more for new hires? I'll leave that one to you, Jerry.
They're paying more already. Look at McDonald's is I take it their hourly wage, what is it, up to $25 an hour, I think. And Starbucks is offering people, a number of companies are offering, even Amazon, I think, is offering people a college education. So whether they're giving them a sign-on bonus or a higher rate of hourly wage or some extra perks like a college education, it's happening already. And it's only going to get steeper, I think, as we have more and more talent shortages and people want to hire because their businesses are doing better and they need the staff.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you, everyone, for all your questions, and thank you for listening, and hope this was important to you. Certainly, if you want to find out anything more, contact me, contact Steve. I do an expanded version of this presentation, which is about 3 times longer with about 3 times more details and suggestions. And then I turn it into a facilitated discussion. So I can help you in your management group to kind of work out some things among yourselves about your decisions. And I'm sure Steve would like to be part of that too.
And any questions about technology or how to get people functional and safe in a secure environment, hit me up. I'll be more than happy to help you out or at least in their direction. I want to thank everybody again for coming. Have yourself a great, wonderful, and a safe day.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.